The bed was empty, but the dog was still guarding someone. At 4:17 in the morning, while a coastal storm pressed hard against the windows of Barracks 12, Ghost sat beside Staff Sergeant Darius Cole's bunk and stared at the floor. The white German Shepherd had not moved in nearly 3 hours. Rain rattled the glass. Wind moaned through the old ventilation ducts. Somewhere beyond the dark building, a flag rope struck a metal pole with a slow, hollow clang. Ghost ignored every sound except the one beneath him. His pale coat caught the weak red glow of the emergency lights, making him look less like a dog and more like a piece of winter that had wandered indoors. His amber eyes remained fixed on a narrow seam between two floorboards. Then he raised one front paw. Scratch, scratch, scratch. 3 slow marks against the wood. He lowered his head and waited. Private First Class Noah Bennett stood in the doorway with a flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. "Ghost," he whispered. "Come on, boy." The dog did not turn. Noah stepped closer. The room smelled of wet uniforms, old pine boards, and the sharp metallic scent left behind when the power failed. Every bunk was empty now. The Marines had been ordered into the central hall while maintenance checked the building after the storm. Every bunk except Darius Cole's had been stripped of blankets and gear. His remained untouched. The dark green blanket was folded at the foot. His boots stood side by side beneath the frame. His dog tags rested on the small table near the wall. But Darius was gone. Ghost lifted his paw again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Noah swallowed. He had seen the K9 work before. Ghost was not a loud dog. He did not bark at shadows or pull against his leash without reason. When he found something, he became quieter. Stillness was his warning. Noah crouched beside him and aimed the flashlight at the floor. The beam slid over scratches in the wood, fresh and pale against the dark boards. "What are you hearing?" he asked. Ghost pressed one ear flat against the floor. His breathing slowed. Noah held his own breath without realizing it. For a moment, there was only the storm. Rain, wind, the distant hum of a backup generator somewhere across the base. Then Ghost's ears rose. His entire body tightened. From beneath the floor came 3 faint knocks. Noah froze. They were so soft he almost believed he had imagined them. Tap, tap, tap. Ghost answered with his paw. 3 scratches. The room fell silent again. Noah backed toward the doorway and called into the hall. "Sergeant Morgan." His voice cracked. He tried again, louder. "Gunny, I need you in here." Footsteps approached quickly. Gunnery Sergeant Caleb Morgan entered with corpsman Emily Carter behind him. Morgan was broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, and usually impossible to surprise. But when he saw Ghost lying flat beside the empty bunk, something in his face changed. "He still won't leave?" Morgan asked. Noah shook his head. "No, Gunny. And I heard something." Morgan looked toward the ceiling. "The pipes." "No," Noah pointed down. "Under the floor." Emily moved closer and knelt. Ghost allowed her near him, but only after she placed one hand gently against his shoulder. His muscles trembled beneath the thick white fur. Not fear. Effort. He had been listening for too long. Emily lowered her ear toward the boards. Morgan switched off his flashlight. The 3 of them waited in the red darkness while the storm leaned against the building like a heavy hand. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Morgan began to rise. Ghost suddenly stood and moved 2 feet toward the center of the room. He pressed his nose to another seam and released a low sound from deep in his chest. Not a growl. A plea. Emily raised one finger. "Quiet." The generator outside coughed and shut down. The ventilation fans faded. The old barracks became completely still. In that stillness, something moved below them. A faint drag. A pause. Then a thin, uneven breath rose through the floorboards. It was not the wind. It was not water in a pipe. It was the fragile sound of lungs fighting for one more moment. Morgan dropped to his knees. "Darius?" he called. No answer came. Ghost struck the floor 3 times. From somewhere beneath the room, barely louder than the rain against the far window, 3 weak knocks answered him. 12 hours earlier, Staff Sergeant Darius Cole had stood beneath the yellow security light outside Barracks 12, watching the first rain of the evening darken the pavement. The storm had not yet reached the coast in full, but the wind already carried salt from the Atlantic and pushed low clouds across the sky. Ghost stood beside him, white fur lifting along his shoulders whenever the gusts came through. Darius looked down at the dog and gave the leash a gentle pull. You know something I do not. Ghost glanced toward the older wing of the building, then back at him. Darius had learned not to ignore that look. At 35, he had spent enough years in uniform to know the difference between nerves and instinct. He was a tall black Marine with close-cut hair, steady brown eyes, and a thin scar near his right temple that caught the light whenever he turned his head. Younger Marines trusted him because he never asked them to carry what he would not carry himself. Older Marines trusted him because he listened before he spoke. Ghost trusted him for reasons no one else fully understood. Their bond had been built in silence, one command at a time, through long training days and longer nights when sleep would not come. That evening, Darius was supposed to finish paperwork, secure his gear, and begin medical leave at sunrise. His shoulder had been troubling him for months. The doctor called it an old injury made worse by years of duty. Darius called it manageable. Ghost called it something else. Every time Darius reached for the transfer folder on his desk, the dog placed one paw over his boot. "It is temporary," Darius said. "You will be with a good team." Ghost did not move. The folder contained orders assigning him to another handler while Darius recovered. Darius had read the pages 6 times, but he had not signed the final line. He told himself it was because the timing felt wrong. The truth sat heavier. Ghost had pulled him through the worst years of his life. Sending him away, even for a few months, felt too much like breaking a promise. A knock came at the open door. Private First Class Noah Bennett stood there, rain spotting the shoulders of his uniform. He was 20 years old, and still carried the careful posture of someone afraid of making the wrong impression. "Staff Sergeant, the western fence sensor keeps showing a fault." Darius checked the time. "Did maintenance look at it?" "They said they would come in the morning." Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the dunes. Ghost rose before Darius did. Noah glanced at the dog. "He has been doing that all day." "Doing what?" "Watching the floor. The walls. Like he hears something." Darius looked toward the old wing. Barracks 12 had been renovated more than once, but parts of it still belonged to another era. The floors creaked when no one walked on them. Cold air moved through vents that were not connected to anything on the current plans. Most Marines joked that the place was haunted. Darius did not believe in ghosts, except the one sitting beside him. "Where is your duty partner?" he asked. Noah hesitated. "Lance Corporal Ruiz went to check the exterior panel about 20 minutes ago." Darius's expression changed. "Alone?" Noah lowered his eyes. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." The rain struck harder against the windows. Darius took his field jacket from the back of the chair. "Show me the last place you saw him." Ghost moved with him, but Darius stopped at the doorway. "Stay." The command was quiet. Ghost's ears lowered. Darius crouched and rested one hand against the dog's neck. "I will be back." Ghost held his gaze. It was the same look he had given Darius years earlier before a training structure failed. The same still warning that had taught Darius to trust what could not be explained. For 1 second, Darius almost changed his mind. Then the lights flickered. From the far end of the hall came a dull sound beneath the floor, followed by a brief cry that the storm nearly swallowed. Noah turned pale. That sounded like Ruiz. Darius stood and handed Noah his flashlight. "Get Sergeant Morgan. Tell him the western wing may not be secure." "What about you?" "I am checking the corridor." Ghost stepped forward. Darius touched 2 fingers to his chest. "Stay." This time, the dog obeyed, but only because the word came from the one voice he had never refused. Darius moved into the darkened hallway, while Noah ran in the opposite direction. Rainwater had begun slipping beneath a warped side door, spreading across the floor in a thin silver sheet. Darius followed the sound past the laundry room and into a section of the building marked for storage. The emergency lights blinked once, then failed. His flashlight swept over stacked cots, old lockers, and a narrow maintenance hatch partly hidden beneath a canvas tarp. The hatch was open. Below it, darkness breathed cold air into the room. "Ruiz." Darius called. No answer. Then he heard something farther inside the passage. Not Ruiz. Noah. Darius turned toward the hall, confused. The young Marine's voice came faintly through the storm, calling from somewhere beneath the building. Darius stepped closer to the opening. Behind him, from Barracks 12, Ghost began to bark for the first time that night. Then the floor shifted under Darius's boots. The floor did not collapse all at once. It lowered beneath Darius with a long wooden groan, as if the old building had taken a breath and forgotten how to release it. He shifted his weight toward the doorway, but the boards rolled under his boots. The flashlight slipped from his hand, struck the edge of the open hatch, and spun into the darkness below. For one suspended second, its beam revealed a narrow service passage, rusted pipes, damp concrete, and a figure curled near the far wall. Then the light vanished beneath a layer of dust. Darius dropped less than 8 feet, landing hard on one knee and one hand. The impact drove the air from his lungs, but he remained conscious. Above him, broken boards settled across the opening, leaving only a thin, crooked seam through which the storm's red emergency glow could pass. "Noah," he called. A weak answer came from the darkness. "Staff Sergeant." Darius reached for the flashlight and found it still working. Its beam trembled across the passage until it found Noah Bennett lying beside a fallen wooden support. The young Marine was awake, but his face had gone pale. One boot was pinned beneath a section of old framing, and rainwater was beginning to run along the floor toward him. Darius moved carefully through the narrow space. His shoulder protested, but he ignored it. "I told you to get Sergeant Morgan." "I tried." Noah's voice shook. The west stairwell door jammed. "I went outside to circle around." The ground gave way near the utility panel. Darius studied the ceiling above them. The old tunnel must have extended beneath both the exterior walkway and the barracks. Noah had fallen through a weakened section and landed farther down the passage. His voice had carried through the empty ducts, reaching Darius from below. "Can you feel your foot?" Darius asked. "Yes." "Good. Keep it still." He tested the wooden support with both hands. It was heavy, swollen from years of moisture, but not impossible to move. "On 3, I lift. You pull back." Noah nodded. Darius counted slowly, then raised the beam just enough for Noah to slide free. The effort sent a sharp ache through Darius's shoulder, and the support settled again with a dull thud. Neither man spoke for a moment. Water continued to gather around their boots. Somewhere above, Ghost barked once, then again, each sound muffled by wood and concrete. Darius looked up. "He knows." Noah listened. "Can he find us?" "He already has." Darius led Noah toward the opening, but the passage shifted beneath another gust of wind. Fine dust drifted from the ceiling. The narrow seam above them closed by an inch. Darius stopped. Forcing the broken boards could bring more of the floor down. He turned his flashlight toward the opposite direction. The tunnel extended beneath the barracks for nearly 30 feet before bending out of sight. An old metal sign hung crooked on the wall. "Medical Access Corridor." Noah stared at it. "This is not on any map." It was once. Darius remembered the strange cold drafts, the hollow echoes beneath certain rooms, and Ghost's habit of listening near the floor. The dog had sensed the empty space long before any of them understood it. Darius removed his dog tags and placed them near the beam of light beneath the opening. If rescuers looked through the seam, the metal might catch their attention. Then he guided Noah deeper into the passage, searching for another exit. The air smelled of wet earth, old timber, and something. Electrical left too long in the rain. After 10 feet, they found a vertical ladder leading toward a sealed hatch. Darius climbed first and pushed against it. It did not move. He tried again. Nothing. Painted shut. Noah asked. "Or covered from above?" Darius descended. His breathing had become slower, not from fear, but from calculation. The water was now above the soles of their boots. They needed to be heard. He picked up a short length of pipe and struck it against the concrete wall 3 times. The sound traveled through the tunnel, hollow and distant. He waited, then repeated it. Above them, Ghost stopped barking. Silence followed. Noah looked toward the ceiling. Why did he stop? Darius's expression softened. Because he is listening. Minutes passed. Darius struck the wall again. 3 knocks. Faintly, from somewhere above, came 3 scratches. Noah's eyes widened. That is him. Darius nodded. Life below. It was a signal Ghost had learned years earlier, born from another dark place and another rescue no one had forgotten. Darius moved Noah toward a shallow recess where the ceiling looked stronger. Sit here. Keep your back against the wall. What about you? I am finding the best place for them to reach us. He followed the scratches as they moved overhead. Ghost was pacing across the floor above, tracking their position by sound. Darius tapped the pipe each time the dog stopped. Scratch, 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 knock, knock, knock. For several minutes, Man and dog spoke through layers of wood and darkness without seeing one another. Then a deep crack rolled through the tunnel. The old support near Noah shifted. Darius stepped beneath it and braced both hands against the beam. "Move farther back," he said. Noah hesitated. "Staff Sergeant, that is an order." Noah obeyed. Darius held the weight steady while the water rose around his ankles. Above, Ghost scratched at the floor until his claws left pale marks in the wood. But the storm swallowed every other sound, and the Marines searching outside never heard the signal. By dawn, Darius's dog tags still lay beneath the broken seam. His boots remained beside his bed. The mud trail ended in the middle of the room, and to everyone except Ghost, Staff Sergeant Darius Cole had simply disappeared. By sunrise, the storm had weakened to a cold gray rain, but Barracks 12 felt darker than it had at midnight. Gunnery Sergeant Caleb Morgan stood near the center aisle while Marines moved quietly around him, checking lockers, windows, storage rooms, and every exit that might explain how a man had vanished without taking his boots, his identification tags, or his field jacket. Nothing made sense. Staff Sergeant Darius Cole never missed morning formation. He did not leave a building without reporting his destination. He did not abandon a young Marine during a storm. Yet his bunk remained untouched, and Ghost remained beside it as if guarding an invisible body. Morgan crouched near the white German shepherd. "Show me," he said. Ghost looked at him, then lowered his nose to the floor. He moved slowly past the foot of the bed, following a scent none of them could detect. At the center of the room, he stopped. The thin line of mud that began near the side door ended beneath his front paws. It did not continue toward the hallway. It did not turn toward a window. It simply disappeared. Private First Class Noah Bennett's name was also missing from the morning roster, and that deepened the unease. 2 Marines gone. 1 trail ending in the middle of a locked room. Morgan ordered teams to search the beach road, the western fence, the drainage fields, and the wooded strip beyond the motor pool. Men spread across the base in rain gear, calling names into the wind. Ghost was offered Darius's shirt to track the scent outside. He smelled it once, then sat down. When a handler tried to lead him through the door, Ghost planted his paws against the boards and looked back at the bed. "He is confused," one Marine said. Corpsman Emily Carter shook her head. "No, we are." She had spent enough time around working dogs to recognize panic, fatigue, and grief. Ghost showed none of them. His breathing was controlled. His eyes were clear. Every few minutes, he repeated the same sequence. He sniffed the seam between the boards. He waited. He scratched 3 times. Then he listened. Emily watched him. "Complete it again." "That is trained behavior," she said. Morgan folded his arms. "Not from any standard search course I know. Maybe Darius taught him something off record." Morgan looked toward the dark stain where rainwater had entered during the night. "Find out." Emily went to Darius's locker and discovered a weathered training notebook beneath 2 folded uniforms. Most of its pages contained ordinary commands, health notes, and scent exercises. Near the back, however, she found a phrase written in Darius's careful block lettering. 3 scratches. Life below. Under it was a date from 4 years earlier. Emily read the entry twice. During a joint disaster training exercise in Virginia, Darius and Ghost had been assigned to search a condemned school after a simulated earthquake. The team believed the building was empty, but Ghost had refused to leave a cracked section of concrete. He had scratched 3 times, paused, and placed his ear against the ground. Darius had copied the action by striking a metal rail 3 times. A missing volunteer answered from a utility chamber below. After that day, Darius turned the moment into a private signal. 3 scratches meant there was life beneath the surface. 3 knocks meant the signal had been understood. Emily carried the notebook to Morgan. He read the entry while rain tapped softly against the windows. Why was this never added to his formal record? He asked. Because it was not a command, Emily said. It was a conversation. They returned to Ghost. Morgan knelt and struck the floor 3 times with his knuckles. The dog's head rose immediately. He moved 2 feet to the left and scratched again. Morgan knocked. Ghost shifted closer to the bed. For the first time that morning, his tail moved once. Not with happiness, with recognition. They were finally listening. Emily pressed her palm to the boards. A faint vibration touched her skin, then vanished. There is space under this room. Morgan looked toward the building plans posted beside the office door. According to the current diagram, the barracks rested on a solid concrete foundation. No basement, no crawl space, no service tunnel. Then why does the floor sound hollow? Emily asked. Morgan sent a Marine to retrieve the full construction records. 10 minutes later, the answer came back. The digital archive showed nothing below Barracks 12, but the original paper plans had been moved years ago to a maintenance building near the old airfield. Morgan ordered them brought over immediately. While they waited, the exterior search teams reported no sign of Darius or Noah. No footprints beyond the washed-out fence line. No vehicle missing. No gate activity during the 17 minutes when the security cameras had failed. It was as if both men had been swallowed by the base itself. Ghost returned to the narrow seam. He pressed his white muzzle against the wood and closed his eyes. Emily lowered her ear beside him. At first, she heard only water moving somewhere far away. Then came a weak metallic sound. 3 knocks, separated by long, exhausted pauses. Emily looked up at Morgan. Someone is down there. Before he could answer, a voice came from the doorway. That is impossible. Master Sergeant Victor Hale entered carrying a roll of old blueprints beneath one arm. Rain shone on his coat, but his face had lost all color. Ghost rose slowly and placed himself between Hale and the bed. Hale stared at the scratches in the floor. Those tunnels were sealed decades ago, he said. Morgan took the plans from him and unrolled them across the nearest bunk. A faded line ran directly beneath the room, marked with 3 words that changed everything. Emergency medical corridor. Then Morgan noticed that one section of the paper, the section beneath Darius's bed, had been carefully torn away. Victor Hale did not reach for the torn blueprint. He only stared at it, and in that small hesitation, Gunnery Sergeant Caleb Morgan understood that the missing section was not an accident. The rain had softened to a steady whisper against the windows, but inside Barracks 12, every sound seemed sharper. Ghost stood motionless between Hale and Darius Cole's bunk, his white coat bright against the dim room, his amber eyes fixed on the Master Sergeant. Who removed this section? Morgan asked. Hale's jaw tightened. I do not know. Ghost released a low breath through his nose. Emily Carter looked from the dog to Hale. He does. Hale glanced at her. That animal is reacting to tension. No, Emily said quietly. He is reacting to you. Morgan placed one hand on the blueprint to keep it flat. The remaining lines showed the old medical corridor running beneath the western half of the building, then disappearing exactly where the paper had been torn away. A faded inspection stamp near the edge carried a date from 8 months earlier. Beside it was Hale's signature. Morgan tapped the mark with one finger. You inspected this structure. Hale's face hardened. I signed a maintenance summary. That is not what I asked. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Hale looked toward the floor, not at Ghost, but at the seam the dog had been guarding. His shoulders lowered slightly. There was a report, he said. A foundation review after the spring storms. Morgan waited. Hale continued, each word slower than the last. The engineers found moisture beneath the western wing. They believed part of the old corridor had shifted. They recommended closing the building until a full survey could be completed. Emily's eyes narrowed. But the building stayed open. We were short on housing. The new barracks were already behind schedule. I was told to keep the problem contained until funding came through. Told by whom? Morgan asked. Hale did not answer. That silence carried its own weight. Ghost scratched the floor 3 times. From below came nothing. Emily immediately knelt. Darius? She called. No response. Morgan turned back to Hale. How do we get into that corridor? Hale looked toward the hallway. There used to be an access hatch in the storage wing, but if the floor shifted during the storm, the main route may be blocked. Used to be. The hatch was covered during renovation. Morgan's voice went cold. Show me. Hale hesitated again. Ghost stepped forward, not aggressive, but certain. Hale finally turned and led them down the corridor. The old storage room smelled of damp canvas and rust. Fallen cots leaned against metal lockers, and rainwater had spread across the floor in a thin reflective sheet. Hale moved a stack of folded tarps aside, revealing a square outline beneath layers of paint. Morgan and 2 Marines cleared the area while Emily remained with Ghost near Darius's bunk. When the hatch was exposed, Morgan pulled at the recessed handle. It did not move. Hale found a pry bar. Together they worked the edges until the seal broke with a dry crack. Cold air rose from below. Morgan aimed a flashlight into the opening. The ladder descended only 6 feet before ending at a wall of shifted timber and packed soil. The main passage was blocked. "Can we clear it?" one Marine asked. Hale shook his head. "Not safely from here. The pressure is coming from the foundation. Removing the wrong beam could bring down more of the floor." Morgan looked back toward Barracks 12. "Then we open the room from above." Hale stepped in front of him. "You cannot. The damaged section is directly under the load-bearing wall. There are 2 Marines below us, and there may be 20 above them if the structure fails." Morgan's expression did not change, but his voice lowered. "Then we move everyone out and bring in rescue engineers." Outside, the last Marines were ordered from the building. Equipment trucks arrived near the western entrance. Portable lights turned the wet pavement white. Specialists placed listening devices along the foundation, but the storm had filled the old pipes with moving water, and every reading came back distorted. One operator removed his headphones and shook his head. "I cannot confirm a human sound." Ghost remained inside with Emily, refusing every attempt to lead him away. Morgan returned to the room and found the dog lying flat across the seam, his chest pressed to the boards. "They say they cannot hear anything," Morgan said. Emily looked at Ghost. "That does not mean there is nothing to hear." Hale entered behind them carrying another folder, this one swollen from damp. He placed it on the bunk. Inside were photographs from the spring inspection. One image showed the corridor beneath Darius's room. A support beam had split along its center. Another showed a narrow air shaft leading toward the exterior wall. In the corner of the final page was a handwritten warning. "Structural failure possible during severe weather. Immediate evacuation recommended." Morgan looked at Hale. "You knew?" Hale's eyes dropped. "I thought we had more time." Beneath the floor, Darius Cole braced both hands against the shifting beam while Noah Bennett sat near the shallow recess, fighting to stay awake. Water moved around their boots, colder now, carrying dust and small fragments of wood through the darkness. Darius tapped the pipe 3 times. No answer came. His arms trembled, but he did not let the beam settle. "Staff Sergeant," Noah said softly, "what if they are gone?" Darius listened to the silence above them. Then, faintly, through the wood, came 3 scratches. His eyes closed for one brief second. "He is still there," Darius said. Above, Ghost rose and moved toward the center of the room. He scratched once, paused, then scratched twice more. Emily placed her palm against the boards. A breath, thin and uneven, touched the other side. "Here," she whispered. "They are directly under us." Then the floor gave a small, warning groan, and Hale finally said the words he had been avoiding. "There is one more way in." Hale led them out through the western door and across the rain-dark pavement toward a low concrete structure near the old motor pool. It had once housed emergency medical supplies, though now its windows were boarded and its metal sign had faded almost white. "There is a secondary service shaft beneath this building," he said. "It connects to the corridor under Barracks 12. Morgan did not slow. Why was it not on the current plans? Because it was sealed after Hurricane Florence. Sealed how? Steel plate. Concrete around the frame. Morgan looked at the rescue engineers moving equipment behind them. "Then we open it." Inside, the abandoned building smelled of dust, mildew, and cold iron. Portable lamps cast long shadows across empty shelves. Hale pointed to a section of floor beneath a heavy storage cabinet. 4 Marines moved it aside, revealing a circular steel plate nearly 4 feet wide. Rust had formed around its bolts. A rescue engineer knelt and ran one gloved hand over the edge. "This will take time." Emily glanced toward the barracks through the boarded window. "They may not have much." Morgan keyed his radio. "Cut all non-essential power to the western sector." A voice answered from the command post. "That will shut down the pumps and ventilation." "Do it." One by one, the sounds of the base faded. The generator stopped. Exterior fans slowed. The distant hum inside the walls disappeared. Rain remained, soft now, tapping against the roof. In Barracks 12, Ghost lifted his head. The silence changed him. His ears turned forward. His body became completely still. Emily had returned to the room with a handheld listening device, but she set it aside. Machines had heard only water and wood. Ghost had heard something else all night. Morgan joined her and knelt beside the dog. "Quiet test," Emily whispered. Every Marine in the building stopped moving. No radios. No boots. No tools. Ghost pressed his ear to the floor. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Nothing came. Morgan's face tightened. Hale stood near the doorway, holding the damp inspection folder against his chest like a confession. Ghost shifted toward the center of the room and scratched 3 times. They waited. No answer. Emily closed her eyes. Again, she said softly. Ghost scratched once more. The boards gave back only silence. Beneath them, Darius Cole fought to keep his breathing steady. The broken support pressed heavier against his hands, and the cold water had climbed halfway up his boots. Noah Bennett sat several feet away near the air shaft, his back against the wall, trying not to shiver. They stopped, Noah said. No, Darius answered, though his voice was weaker. They are listening. He lowered one hand from the beam for less than a second, reached for the pipe, and struck the concrete. Once. The sound barely traveled. Twice. His grip slipped. He steadied himself and struck a 3rd time. Above, Emily's eyes opened. There. Morgan placed his ear against the floor. At first, he heard nothing. Then a faint metallic tap moved through the wood. 3 slow knocks. Ghost's tail touched the floor once. Morgan stood. We have confirmation. The rescue engineers began marking the safest cut points around the bunk. Hale stepped closer to the wall and studied the old photograph. The support beam runs east to west. If you open here, the load could shift. Morgan pointed toward the center aisle. Then where? Hale traced a line with his finger. 2 feet closer to the window. There should be a narrow pocket beside the air shaft. Ghost moved before anyone else. He crossed the room and stopped exactly where Hale had indicated. Then he looked back at them. Morgan nodded. Mark it. Outside, crews worked on the sealed service shaft while another team drilled small inspection holes through the floor. Dust rose in pale clouds. A fiber optic camera was lowered through the first opening, but the lens found only darkness and wet timber. The second hole revealed an empty section of passage. The third met solid earth. Time stretched. Rainwater ran from the Marine's sleeves and collected near the walls. Ghost remained beside the 4th mark, refusing to step away. The engineer drilled slowly. When the bit broke through, a thread of cold air rose from below. Emily leaned close. Darius. No answer. She called again. Noah. For several seconds, the only sound was the faint drip of water beneath the floor. Then a breath moved through the opening. Thin. Uneven. Human. Morgan lowered the listening tube. I hear one. Emily's expression changed. Only one. He listened again. The room held still. A second sound came, quieter than the first, followed by a soft scrape. Maybe 2, he said. I cannot tell. Ghost pressed his nose to the hole and inhaled. His posture tightened. Then he moved 3 feet away and began scratching at another seam. Hill looked down at the torn blueprint. The corridor splits beneath this room. Morgan turned toward him. You said it was one passage. It was, before the renovation. A partition may have been added. The team opened the first section carefully. Beneath the boards was a narrow pocket near the air shaft. A flashlight beam found Noah Bennett lying against the wall, conscious but barely able to lift his head. Relief moved through the room. We found him, one Marine whispered. Ghost did not react. He kept scratching at the second seam. Morgan looked from Noah below to the white dog beside him. Darius is not there. Emily listened again. From deeper beneath the floor came no knock, no voice, only one fading breath. Ghost lowered himself over the boards and would not move. Noah Bennett opened his eyes when the first board lifted, but the relief on the Marines' faces did not reach him. Staff Sergeant Cole, he whispered. Emily Carter leaned closer to the opening. Where is he? Noah tried to raise one hand and pointed toward the darker branch of the corridor. Behind the partition. He moved me toward the air shaft. His voice faded, then returned. He stayed with the beam. Morgan looked at the rescue engineers. Get Bennett out first. The opening was widened just enough for a harness. 2 Marines lowered straps, secured Noah carefully, and guided him toward the surface while Emily spoke to him in a calm, steady voice. Ghost watched every movement but never left the second seam. When Noah finally reached the room, pale and soaked from the knees down, he turned his head toward the dog. He kept saying you would hear him. Ghost's ears lifted, but his eyes remained fixed on the floor. Morgan crouched beside Noah. How far is Darius from here? Maybe 12 feet. There is an old wall between us. Part wood, part concrete. The passage bends around it. Hale unfolded the damaged inspection photographs again. That partition was added during the renovation. It was supposed to isolate the unstable section. Morgan looked at him. Supposed to? Hale's silence answered. Beneath the floor, the air had grown colder. Darius stood with his back against the wall, and both hands braced beneath the timber. His shoulders shook with effort. The beam had shifted lower, but the pocket behind him remained open. He could no longer hear Noah breathing nearby, and for a moment he feared the worst. Then voices carried faintly through the passage. Rescue voices. He closed his eyes. They had found the kid. That was enough to let one small measure of peace enter the darkness. He struck the pipe once. The sound fell flat against the partition. He tried again, but his arm would not rise as high. Above him, Ghost suddenly stood. He moved away from the seam, crossed to the wall beside Darius's bunk, and pressed his nose against the baseboard. Then he released the first true growl anyone had heard from him that morning. It was not anger. It was urgency. Emily followed and placed the listening tube against the wall. A faint scrape came through, then a single knock. Morgan pointed toward the marked section. He is not directly under the floor. He is behind that partition. The rescue engineer studied the structure. Opening from above will not reach him. We need the service shaft. A call came over the radio from the abandoned medical building. The steel plate had been cut loose. The secondary shaft was open, but the corridor beyond it was narrow, flooded in places, and partly blocked by fallen framing. Morgan turned toward Ghost. The dog was already at the door. 10 minutes later, the rescue team gathered inside the old supply building. Portable lights shone down the circular shaft. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of wet earth and old wood. A camera was lowered first. It showed a corridor barely 3 feet high in places, with debris narrowing the route toward Barracks 12. A person cannot get through the final section, one engineer said. Not with breathing equipment. Emily looked at Ghost. He can. Morgan studied the dog, then the harness laid across the floor. Only if we can keep him safe. They fitted Ghost with a lightweight rescue vest, a small oxygen tube secured along one side, and a radio beacon on his collar. The dog stood calmly through every strap and buckle, but his eyes never left the shaft. Noah, wrapped in a thermal blanket near the doorway, watched him. He knows exactly where to go. Morgan knelt and held Ghost's face between both hands. Find Darius. At the sound of the name, Ghost stepped forward. Emily clipped the safety line to his vest. Bring him home. Ghost descended the ladder without hesitation. At the bottom, he lowered his body and moved into the passage, white fur brushing against damp concrete. The line followed behind him through the darkness. Above, the team tracked the beacon across a small monitor. 10 feet. 15. 20. Then Ghost stopped. His breathing came through the collar microphone, slow and controlled. A low whine followed. He found the partition, Emily said. The camera attached to his vest showed a narrow gap near the floor, barely wide enough for him to enter. Ghost pushed through. Dust clouded the lens. The signal flickered. For 3 long seconds, the screen went dark. Then the image returned. Darius appeared in the beam, seated now beneath the timber, one shoulder pressed against it, his head lowered. Ghost crawled to him and touched his nose to Darius's hand. Darius did not move. The room above and the shaft behind Ghost fell silent. Then Darius's fingers closed weakly around the white fur. His lips moved near the collar microphone. Good boy. Ghost nudged the oxygen tube toward his face and lay against his chest, sharing warmth in the narrow space. The monitor captured one shallow breath from Darius. Then another. Emily pressed a hand over her mouth. Morgan looked toward the engineers. Now we know the exact position. They began reinforcing the corridor from both sides, sliding narrow supports beneath the weakened frame one piece at a time. Every movement had to be slow. Every inch mattered. Ghost remained beside Darius, his body still, his breathing steady enough for 2. Then the timber above them shifted with a deep wooden sigh. The rescue line tightened. Morgan gripped the radio. Ghost, stay. Through the collar microphone came Darius's faint voice, almost too soft to hear. He will. The timber settled another inch, and the sound traveled through the corridor like distant thunder. Ghost did not move. His body remained pressed against Darius, one shoulder beneath the oxygen tube, his white fur darkened by damp dust. Darius opened his eyes and looked toward the small camera fixed to the dog's vest. The light was weak, but it was enough to catch the quiet recognition in his face. "You found me," he whispered. Ghost touched his muzzle to Darius's chin. Above them, Morgan heard every breath through the collar microphone. He turned to the engineers working from the service shaft. "Tell me what we need." The lead engineer studied the live image. "The beam is carrying part of the floor and the old partition. We cannot pull him out until we support both sides." "How long?" "As long as it takes to do it without losing the passage." Morgan looked toward Barracks 12 through the open doorway. Rain still moved across the base in silver lines, but the storm had passed. Time had not. 2 narrow braces were guided down the shaft, then pushed along the corridor on low rollers. Marines worked shoulder to shoulder, passing tools through the cramped space. Every few minutes, Emily called Darius's name through the radio. Sometimes he answered. Sometimes only Ghost's breathing came back. Noah sat nearby under a blanket, refusing transport until he knew what happened. "He held that beam for me," he said. "He told me to move, and he stayed." Emily placed one hand on his shoulder. "Then we do the same for him." Beneath the barracks, Ghost shifted slightly and placed one paw across Darius's wrist. The gesture was small, almost ordinary, but it kept Darius focused. He followed the rhythm of the dog's breathing. In, out, slow, steady. When the darkness pulled at him, Ghost nudged his hand again. "Good stay," Darius murmured. It was the first command he had taught the dog years ago, back when Ghost was young, restless, and too intelligent for simple obedience. Stay had never meant do nothing. It meant hold your ground until the person you trusted returned. Now the meaning had changed. Ghost was not waiting for Darius to return. He was keeping Darius from leaving. The first brace reached the partition. The engineer pushed it into position beneath the lower frame and tightened it by hand. The second brace stopped 2 feet short, blocked by a section of fallen wood. "We need more room," he said over the radio. Morgan looked at the opening in Barracks 12. "Can we lift from above?" Hale stood beside the torn blueprint, pale but steady now. "There is a narrow gap near the window. If we raise the floor less than half an inch, it may free the brace." "May?" Morgan asked. Hale met his eyes. "It is the only chance." A hydraulic jack was placed beneath a steel plate in the room. Marines cleared the area. Ghost remained on. The monitor, still beside Darius. Morgan gave the order. The jack rose slowly. The floor answered with a low groan. Dust fell in the passage. Darius closed his eyes. Ghost lowered his body over him. "Easy," Emily said into the radio, though she knew the dog was not the one who needed reassurance. The floor lifted a fraction. In the service tunnel, the blocked brace moved forward. "Hold it there," the engineer called. The second support slid into place. Bolts tightened. Pressure shifted away from Darius. For the first time in hours, the beam rose from his shoulder. He drew a fuller breath. The rescue team widened the path from the shaft, removing loose boards one at a time. Ghost stood, then looked back at Darius as if asking permission to move. Darius's hand found the side of his neck. "Go." The dog did not obey. Darius almost smiled. Of course. Morgan crawled into the final section behind the engineers. The passage was too low to stand, and every surface felt cold beneath his hands. When he reached the partition gap, he saw Ghost first. The white dog lay like a shield beside Darius, amber eyes reflecting the flashlight. "I am here," Morgan said. Darius looked toward him. "Noah, safe." The word changed something in Darius's face. The tension left his jaw. Morgan secured a rescue strap around his chest while another Marine supported his legs. "We are taking you out." Darius looked at Ghost. "He comes with me." That was never in question. They moved inch by inch through the corridor. Ghost stayed beside Darius's head, matching every pause. At the base of the shaft, hands reached down. Darius was raised first, slowly, into the abandoned medical building where Emily and Noah waited. When his stretcher cleared the opening, Noah stood despite the blanket around his shoulders. "Staff Sergeant." Darius looked at him and gave the smallest nod. "You followed the order." Then Ghost climbed from the shaft. The moment his paws touched the floor, he went straight to Darius and rested his head against the side of the stretcher. Outside, the clouds broke just enough for one pale line of morning light to cross the wet pavement. Darius lifted his hand and placed it on the dog's head. No one spoke. No one needed to. The command had been given hours earlier, in darkness, beneath a failing floor. Ghost had stayed. And because he had, 2 Marines came home. 3 weeks later, the western wing of the base stood empty behind a chain-link barrier. Barracks 12 had been closed, its windows boarded, its doors sealed, and the old medical corridor beneath it mapped for the first time in decades. Investigators found the spring inspection report, the missing photographs, and the chain of decisions that had kept the building open. Victor Hale gave a full statement. He did not blame the storm. He did not blame the budget. He admitted that he had seen the warning and believed there would be more time. His silence had not begun with cruelty. It had begun with delay, then fear, then the hope that nothing would happen. But something had happened, and hope could not carry the weight of a failing floor. Staff Sergeant Darius Cole spent 12 days in recovery. His shoulder required rest, and exhaustion left him sleeping for hours at a time, but he was alive. Noah Bennett recovered in a room 2 doors down. Each morning, he walked a little farther through the hospital corridor, first with assistance, then on his own. He visited Darius every day, though their conversations were usually brief. "You did not leave me," Noah said once. Darius looked through the window at the gray Atlantic sky. "That is not how Marines work." Noah nodded toward Ghost, who lay beside the bed with his white head resting across Darius's boot. "Maybe he taught you." Darius smiled faintly. "Maybe we taught each other." Ghost had been permitted to stay at the hospital under working dog policy, but he behaved less like a trained K9 and more like a quiet guardian who had already completed his mission. He ignored the carts, the closing doors, and the voices in the hallway. He watched Darius breathe. At night, when the room grew still, he slept with one ear raised. If Darius shifted, Ghost opened his eyes. If Darius coughed, Ghost stood. No one had ordered him to remain. No one had to. On the morning Darius was discharged, Emily Carter arrived carrying the unsigned transfer folder. From his old desk, the pages were wrinkled from damp, but the final line was still blank. She placed it beside him. "The new handler is waiting for a decision." Darius looked down at Ghost. The dog met his eyes, calm and patient. Darius picked up the folder, tore it once through the center, and placed the pieces in the wastebasket. "Decision made." Emily smiled. "I thought so." Darius did not return to Barracks 12. He was assigned temporary quarters near the rehabilitation center, in a small brick building that faced a line of live oaks. The room had 1 bed, 1 desk, and a wide window that caught the afternoon sun. On his first evening there, Darius unpacked slowly. He placed his boots beneath the bed. He hung his uniform inside the closet. He set his dog tags on the nightstand, then paused. For a moment, the soft clink of metal carried him back beneath the floor, into cold water and darkness, where every sound had mattered. Ghost walked across the room and stopped near the bed. He lowered his head, listened, and scratched the floor 3 times. Darius froze. Then he understood. The boards were solid. There was no hidden corridor, no broken beam, no trapped breath beneath them. Ghost was not warning him. He was asking a question. Darius knelt with care and tapped the floor 3 times in return. Ghost's tail moved once. The old signal had changed again. Once, it had meant life below. Now it meant something simpler. "I am here." Darius sat on the edge of the bed and rested one hand against the dog's neck. Sunlight poured through the window, turning Ghost's white coat almost gold. Outside, Marines crossed the courtyard in pairs, their voices carrying through the warm coastal air. Somewhere in the distance, a flag rope struck a pole with the same hollow rhythm that had sounded through the storm. This time, the noise held no warning, only memory. Noah returned to duty 2 months later. On his first morning back, he stood outside the rehabilitation building holding a new brass tag for Ghost's collar. One side carried the dog's name. The other held 3 small marks beneath a single line of text. "Life listens." Noah fastened it carefully while Darius watched. "Seems right," he said. Darius ran one thumb across the words. "It does." There was no ceremony, no crowd, no speech about courage or loyalty. Ghost simply leaned against Noah for a second, then returned to Darius's side. Some truths do not need to be announced. They live in the space between a hand and a paw, between 3 scratches and 3 answering knocks, between the moment someone disappears and the soul that refuses to believe they are gone. That night, Darius slept without the transfer folder on his desk and without the old weight pressing against his chest. Ghost lay beneath the window, washed in moonlight. Near midnight, Darius woke and reached one hand toward the floor. Ghost touched his nose to the open palm. Then both of them settled again. The room was quiet. The bed was no longer guarded because it was empty. It was guarded because someone had finally come home.